This morning I'm going to tell you a variation on a story that I've told you before. On my last Sunday, before I was supposed to go into seminary, before I was going to start my classes, my senior pastor had decided that they wanted to have a love offering for me to help me buy my books, help me pay for school, all that stuff. I did not want this to happen. Because when I went into seminary, I was going in obedience, right? I felt like God had called me into ministry, but I felt like I didn't have what it took to be in ministry. So I was going, but I was kind of like, well, I might give an MDiv, that's a pastor degree, or I might get an MDiv MSW and go be a counselor, like I wanted to be a therapist. I was like, so I'm going to go, God, because I think you want me to, but I don't want to. And I don't think I have what it takes, but I'm going to go, and we're going to see how this goes. So they wanted to bless the pastor, right? To bless the pastor to be, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be a pastor. I don't want you to do this. But they did it anyway. And something you have to know about my family is there's a home a couple blocks over from the church. It was a nonprofit called the Home for Aged Women. And my mom and my dad would pick up a couple of the women there every Sunday and bring them to church with us to go to Sunday school and to go to church. And there was one woman, Edna, who sat near us. And when they passed the plate for the love offering, I noticed that she put $1 in. Now, Edna had developmental disability. She had never earned any money, so whatever Social Security she got, it was not much. And she gave me $1, and it moved me. It shifted something in my being. And I stopped thinking about what I didn't have and began to think about what I might do to be worthy of this gift that she had so richly bestowed upon me. And I stand here a decade later as your pastor. Now, you may not have ever experienced the kind of scarcity feeling like you don't have enough to do what God's calling you to do. Maybe you have, but all of us have experienced a kind of scarcity in our lives, a time when resources felt thin on the ground, a time when we did not feel like we had what it took for us to do what God was asking us to do. Maybe we feel like that now as a church, like we don't have enough to do what God is asking us to do. This is a challenging season, and there's no way around it. We have a beautiful church building. We have an aging original wing. Every window in that wing is cracked. It is drafty and cold in the winter. It is not air conditioned, so it is hot and humid in the summer. There are things we need to take care of around here, right? That's not the only thing that needs fixing. And as we look around this room, we might say, there's not enough. We don't have enough financial resources. We don't have enough people. We feel the squeeze, right? We feel the scarcity. It feels like resources are thin on the ground. And the question we have to wrestle with is, how do we faithfully respond to this present moment? And I think we can find comfort in the fact, as we look at this story from Jesus, that we are not the first followers to face a moment where it felt like resources were thin on the ground. Not the first to face a crisis where it felt like there was scarcity instead of abundance. We are facing a challenging moment, perhaps. There's no doubt about it. But in this moment, we do not stand alone. We stand with a God who has seen us through fire, right? Who has seen us through pandemic, right? Who has seen us through a flood the day after Christmas. Lord, have mercy. And we are still here. We are still proclaiming the goodness of God, and we are still living the goodness of God. We have a God who can see us through as we face the challenges of this present moment. We are facing them with a risen Lord who fed 5,000 people from one boy's snack. Can you imagine this moment from the disciples' perspective? The crowd has followed Jesus into the wilderness. There is no food. There's no money to buy food if there was food. And Jesus is like, how are we going to feed the people, Philip? Can you imagine Philip's response? I think about Philip through the perspective of Lou. Like, if you had only told me, Jesus, that you wanted to feed 5,000 people ahead of time, we could have gone fishing. We could have built a fire. We could have had a cookout. But you did not tell me ahead of time, Jesus. And now 6 months' salary would not be enough to buy each of them a single nugget from Wendy's. Not even a nugget. And then I imagine Jesus saying, okay. I hear you. But what do you have? And I love this question. As I was preparing this sermon, I thought about this past summer when we talked about Moses and how God called him to lead the people from oppression into freedom. And Moses is like, God, I don't have it. And God says, okay. I hear you. I'm paraphrasing. But what do you have? What's in your hand? And Moses was holding a shepherd's staff, a wooden staff. Doesn't feel like much to him. Moses' hands were raised to hold a gold scepter, but he had a wooden staff. And God used that and had him throw it on the ground. It became a snake, a sign of God's power and presence with him. That wooden staff Moses would use to part the waters of the Red Sea. That wooden staff Moses would raise so that the people might be victorious over their enemies. God uses and blessed what was in Moses' hand, and it was enough. And in this miracle story, I hear Jesus asking the same question. What is in your hand? He's asking it to the disciples. He's asking it to the crowd. He's asking it to us. What do you have in your hand today? Are you willing to share it? Can you trust me with it? And one small boy says, yes. I have something in my hand. I am willing to share it. I'll trust you with it. It's 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fish. Jesus blesses it. He breaks them. He serves the crowd, and it is enough. Jesus sees their need, and he meets it. They were there because they needed him. They needed a word from him. They needed hope that their present circumstances could change. They needed to be healed by him. They needed to be fed by him, both spiritually and also physically. And Jesus sees them. He sees all of them. He sees their need and he anticipates it before the crowd even gets hungry, before the single belly rumbles. Jesus says they're going to get hungry. What do we have to feed the people? And I wonder what might shift in our spirits if we believed that Jesus sees our needs. That when we feel like resources are thin on the ground, when we feel like we don't have enough to do whatever it is, that Jesus sees it. That in fact, he already has anticipated it and is working to meet that need. Jesus meets the needs of the crowds with the gifts of the crowd. He provides for them using the gifts that are present within the community. And Jesus here shows us what it looks like, how God can multiply our gifts and provide for need within the community. Jesus doesn't make food appear out of nowhere. He multiplies what is there. It doesn't look like enough, but in the hands of God, it is enough. Jesus today is asking us to share what we have, whatever is in our hand, and trust him to do the rest. It's kind of like the story of the stone soup, right? It's just a couple carrots. It's just some potatoes. It's a 1/4 cup of butter. What could you even do with that? But when we put it all together, it makes something spectacular. You know, when I looked over our giving, when I signed all those thank you letters, as I looked at it, I thought of that stone soup story. As I thought about all the ways that people volunteer their time at this church to mow the lawns and to trim the bushes and to pull the weeds and to take care of the building and the parsonage and to make sure that the administrative stuff here that needs to happen gets done, that's all volunteer hours. That's all people giving their time and their talents. As I looked at that and as I looked at the giving, I was like, this is a stone soup scenario. We're giving what we have. And in the hands of God, it adds up to be enough, or close to it. It feels like something really special here, that as we share, God does indeed do more than we could ask or even imagine here at Christ United Methodist Church. And I am grateful. You bless us with your presence here. We're blessed by your being here. We're blessed by all that you share, and I am grateful. And I'm grateful for the ways that you carry the love that you experience here and the blessedness that you experience here, and you carry it out in the world so that others can experience it too. I am grateful, and I thank God for you. My brothers and sisters, what you have in your hands is special. What you have in your hands is enough. God doesn't make junk. So can we look at our hands today and can we believe it? Can we trust that it is enough? Philip wasn't wrong that 5 loaves and 2 fish wasn't much in the face of so many, but in Jesus' hands it is enough. You might feel like you don't have much to give. Whatever you're holding might not seem like a lot in your eyes, but in God's eyes, it is enough and more than enough. Jesus can take what you offer and work it into a blessing that would astonish our imaginations. Now you might be thinking, Pastor Sarah, I'm new here. I'm not really committed to this whole giving to the church thing. Okay, I hear, and I'm going to say I hear you. I hear you. And I'll say this to you, I don't care where you give, I care that you give. That you give of your money, that you give of yourself, that you give of your time and your treasure, because generosity is a virtue. And like the other virtues of honesty or courage, they are hard to do, difficult to embody. But as we embody them, we are blessed and we become blessings. We need more truth tellers in this world, don't we? We need more courageous people who stand up and say, this is right and this is wrong, don't we? We need more people who say, this is what I have and it's not a lot, but I'm willing to share it with you, don't we? Generosity is a virtue. When we practice it, we are blessed. My sisters and brothers, Jesus is at work in your life. What you have is enough. In the places where you feel like resources are thin, Jesus is at work. He sees that need. He has anticipated it. He is meeting it even now. Can you trust it? Can you trust it? Can you give what you have to the glory of God and receive the blessing that comes from being generous? I hope so. I believe so. I want that for you. Let us trust that what God has given is enough. Let's share it. And let's experience the blessing that comes from sharing what we have with others.